So I put a challenge out to the people who don't think that the Congress is an Aboriginal organisation or a representative organisation to tell me what part of that article is not being applied. The next three articles also have application, but I won't mention all of those. But Article 19 says states shall consult and cooperate in good faith with the Indigenous peoples through their own representative institutions in order to obtain their free, prior and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures that may affect them. Article 20 goes on to again talk about the legitimacy of Indigenous peoples' institutions. We know that next month the Parliament of Australia will be considering the Northern Territory laws, new bills, to follow up on the intervention that commenced in 2007, on June 29, 2007. And we'll be calling upon the Parliament to abide by what is in Article 19, that is to respect the institutions, representative institutions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and to ensure that free, prior and informed consent exists before putting into effect any laws affecting our peoples. Let me talk a little bit more about the Congress, which is registered, it's not a statutory authority. No government has control over the running and operations of the Congress. It's registered as a private company and the members are the company. But what's most important, and this is particularly again I say to those people who want to call Congress government puppets, is the Charter, the Constitution of the Congress. And the Congress is clearly driven by 6 objectives. Those 6 objectives talk about leadership and recognition of the status of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population as peoples. It talks about protection and advocacy of rights. It talks about ensuring representation and providing communications to be a conduit for the voice of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and for being a voice between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The objectives also talk about the role of Congress to secure the futures, the political, the social, cultural, environmental futures of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The 5th objective is to build strong relationships with government, with industry and amongst our own peoples and communities based upon equality and mutual respect. And the 6th objective is to find solutions, to identify the issues, to research the solutions and to educate government, service providers, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and communities. There are 6 very, very important objectives. These are the objectives I see of self-determination. These are the objectives that are carried forward in the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. These are the objectives that have been adopted as a universal standard for all Indigenous peoples around the world. I'll just add one more point about the Constitution. It says, in carrying out the purposes, the Congress will operate with the following values: to use the highest standards of professionalism and objectivity, integrity and honesty, accountability, transparency and openness, participation and inclusion, and to be informed. And these are the principles that the elected board has set into place and continues to set into place. So the People's Forum that we're organising today is the first of these events. It's the first time we've called a People's Forum, and it's to come at a very timely opportunity of when sovereignty and self-determination should be at the top of the table. It should be at the top of the table because just a week ago, the government-appointed expert panel provided a report on Australia's Constitution and how the Constitution might be revised to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. You will have all no doubt seen some of the debate going on in the media about the report, about the proposal to reform the Constitution. Unfortunately, I have to say at this stage, it's an uninformed debate. It's a debate doused in ignorance and doused in Australia's shameful history. I'm recommending to everyone here and to people who are watching on the webcast to read the report. It's a hard report to get in hard copy, but it is available online. It is always difficult to sit down and read hundreds of pages of report provided to government, but you'll find the report has particular chapters. The chapters I'm most interested in expressing are the chapters on sovereignty, which makes interesting reading and is intended to inform the government, to inform the Parliament and to inform Australians about the issue of sovereignty for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And the other chapter is about making agreements or treaties. And again, this is about informing the government, informing the Parliament and informing all Australians. And if people take the time to read those chapters, chapters 8 and 9, then I'm sure we'll start the road towards informed communities and informed sectors in Australian society. To have a debate about the Constitution, about what's good for Australia, what's not good for Australia, without reading the report, is to douse in ignorance and to douse in the views and the opinions of the 18th century. So the People's Forum is part of the process now to inform people. It's consistent with the Congress challenge of finding solutions. It's consistent with the Congress challenge of building relationships. It's consistent with the Congress challenge to ensure that we are creating informed sectors, and it's consistent with the challenge to promote and protect the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Most important is consistent with the challenge to provide leadership at the national level. And I think this has been one of the big problems of our history of the 40 years, and particularly over more recent years, is where is the leadership in our communities, where is it going to come from and where is it going to go. Now, I'm the national co-chair of the Congress and Jodie Brown is the other co-chair. We're not saying we are the leaders. That is up for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to decide. But I know that the board of the Congress is moving down the road to put these issues out there to our people, to have these issues considered in a deliberate way, to look for the answers and to look for the solutions. I'd like to, I'm nearing the end, I'd like to now just talk briefly about sovereignty and self-determination. I've already mentioned that there's chapters in this report, this latest report, but there are documents written time after time on this issue. And if you go back and look at this, it'll be some of what we present today. You'll see that the National Aboriginal Consultative Committee, when it was formed in 1973, I think it was first established, it put treaty down as one of its objectives. It campaigned for that, and it called for the government to look to form an agreement with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. When the NACC was replaced by the National Aboriginal Conference, the NACC immediately came out and called for the government to make some significant reforms. And one of these, which had followed through until the government withdrew all funding to the organisation in 1985, was for the treaty for the Makarrata. And at the time that the government withdrew the funding in 1985, the NAC was fighting for national land rights legislation. Each of these organisations, these national representative bodies that have been established, have fought for sovereignty and self-determination. And each of these bodies, including the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission, the most recent of the national bodies, have been brought about into demise. How people remember that is up to them, but it's quite clear that each of those bodies came to an abrupt end when they were adamant about protecting the rights of sovereignty and self-determination. With no further ado, I know we've gone over time. We'd like to present to you now the question of the Aboriginal Tent Embassy. What does this represent? And to do that, we're asking someone who was active during that time, politically active to try and get changes in Australia, who participated in the establishment of the Aboriginal Tent Embassy here in Canberra and was regarded as being an activist voice at that time. We all know, of course, that Pat Eatock continues to be an activist voice, but it will be very, very encouraging and interesting to hear Pat talk of the struggle in 1972. Pat's presentation will be in two sections of 15 minutes. We want to, after the first 15 minutes, start screening the film Ningla Ana. Some of you may have seen this film, but it's surprising that many people have not. And this is actual footage of the protests around those times in the early 1970s, and you hear from a lot of the activists at the time we were speaking. Because it's a 70-minute film, we've split it into two, so we'll play the first half straight after Pat's initial presentation. We will then stop the film halfway and get Pat to talk further on those experiences, and then go for morning tea break, and then resume the film after morning tea break, and at the end of the film then open it up to a panel discussion. Now, I understand that the panel for this session, we had asked Brian Butler and Dennis Egginton to be on that panel, but Dennis, I'm not sure, is Dennis on his way, Lyndon, or should I go without him on that? He'll be on his way? Okay, so Brian Butler, I perhaps should introduce the Congress board members who are here. So I should have done that earlier on, sorry. So can I introduce Brian? Brian, can you just face the audience there? Brian Butler down the front, who's one of our 8 board of directors. And Rod Little, is Rod in the room? Yeah, Rod's just gone out with Auntie Agnes. We have 2 other of the board members who are coming in for this event and staying during the week. That is Dennis Egginton from Perth and Daphne Yaron from Victoria, both of whom we're expecting to be here this morning. The other members who are not here are actually participating in the Invasion Day activities in their other locations. But it's very pleasing to see that 5 of the 8 board members were able to come to Canberra at this important time on this. And I just remind you that this is something that's on the Congress agendas. I didn't mention when I said before, when the National Congress met in June of 2011 and they were asked to identify what were the 5 high priority issues, sovereignty was one of the policy issues that the National Congress identified. So we will, as a board, be expected to report back to the next National Congress meeting, which will be after June of this year, 2012, on what has progressed in advancing the policy on self-determination. Of course, this forum, perhaps the outcomes from this forum, will form part of that report. So with no further ado, I'd like to stop my introduction there. I will talk to you again after lunch to talk about the history during those 40 years of national political representation and pose the question, is the representation appropriate? What needs to be done to get unity in that area? So let me now introduce you to Pat Eatock,